Getting a business off the ground requires data-driven strategy and truly exceptional product. But entrepreneurs know there is a lot more to building a business than analytics and sleek design.
We want to know what makes founders tick, how they pivot to tackle the hard stuff, what keeps them up all night, and what keeps them going each day. I'm Jenny Rudin.
And I'm Katie Demo, and we're the co-founders of Brass Clothing and your hosts for Making It Happen, a show where we have raw, honest conversations with other founders like ourselves.
Join us for fly-on-the-wall access to intimate discussions about what it's really like to start, run, and grow a business. This is Making It Happen. Some founders believe that having a positive impact on society is as important as profitability and ROI. Tina Beilinson, co-founder and CEO of Starling, knows a thing or two about striking this balance. Starling is a next-generation membership that supports parents through pregnancy and early parenthood by making care more communal.
But doing work for the greater good still means you face the challenges of entrepreneurship. In fact, oftentimes it can make the journey to building a successful company even more turbulent.
Today on Making It Happen, find out why Tina believes that companies can be a force for good in the world, and discover how she and her team are empowering women through entrepreneurship with Starling. Hey, Tina, welcome.
So, Tina, we usually kick off the show by setting the stage. Would you mind just sharing with everyone a little bit about your background and what led you to starting Starlings?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's been quite a journey, and actually it starts from when my family first immigrated to the US when I was 6 years old. So I was actually born in Kazakhstan, and a few years after I was born, the Soviet Union collapsed, which was obviously a very tumultuous experience for my family. And my family actually is Jewish, and being Jewish in the Soviet Union was not an easy thing. And so the second that we could get out, we did. And so we were granted asylum to come into the US, and we moved to Cleveland, of all places, Cleveland, Ohio, because it had a big Jewish community and actually a support network to help Soviet Jews really make their way into the US and get settled, which a lot of people don't realize actually. And so my family came to the US with just 2 suitcases and really nothing else. And it actually was my whole extended family that came together. So my aunt and uncle, my cousin, my grandparents, and that family community and extended, family has always been really, really important in my life. And so we settled in Cleveland, and my parents could barely speak English. And so they actually ended up becoming entrepreneurs by necessity. It was not the glamorized entrepreneurial journey as we see today. It was very much how do we make a living? We're going to hustle and figure it out. And so that has always been a really important thread in my life. And seeing how they took control of their own destiny and, with entrepreneurship and, just kind of hustling their way through and to make a living, make ends meet was something that was always extremely inspiring to me. So now both my parents actually run their own small businesses, and they employ people in the broader immigrant community, and have been continuing to give back that way. So that's something that has been a really strong, piece of inspiration in my life. And then anyway, kind of going through all the way to college, I went to Denison, small liberal arts school in Ohio, joined a consulting firm right at college. It was the one big firm that recruited on campus. And I did not know what I wanted to do with my life, but quickly figured out that for me, having a tangible impact with whatever I was working on was super important. And feeling like I was actually able to make a difference in people's lives was something that was extremely motivating to me. And so I realized that consulting was not for me. I think a lot of people do, although, obviously provided some great structure coming into a different role and a great experience, and ended up being lucky enough to join Warby Parker in the early days. So I was about the 100th employee there. I joined the company right before we started launching any stores, and was there for 6 years, and was this incredible roller coaster ride of the startup world, and was very lucky to have leaders like Neil and Dave, who are the co-founders of Warby Parker, to really learn from and like understand like how do you sustainably grow a company that also does a lot of good in the world. And so for me, like every day at Warby was honestly like so fulfilling, knowing that we were working towards a bigger vision, and also seeing the model of like how do you build a company that's for profit but also is doing good in the world.
Would you say that experience planted a seed in you in terms of thinking about your future? Obviously, we will get to your graduate school experience in the middle, but do you think that planted a seed even at that point that you had wanted to perhaps build your own business and focus on that space?
Definitely. So I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Because I was an immigrant, my family was not, definitely not prepared, and was not going to be, happy about me just quitting my job and, going off and starting a company. So I always saw sort of the experience that I had at Warby Parker as almost just like an incredible training ground to like get all the operating experience under my belt to really feel like I can own that journey and feel really confident in that. But that definitely was like very much like an important step in thinking about like how can we use this technology to offer better health outcomes and more access to high quality care. And for me, a passion area has always been women's health. I mean, just being, obviously someone that went through the healthcare system as a woman and, didn't always feel necessarily understood or heard. I think that's something that a lot of us experience. And so definitely planted a seed in my mind of like, how can we build something that truly has the customer at the center of the experience? And that's something that I learned a ton about at Warby because it was always, at the end of the day, about the customer experience. And that is how we built everything. And so how can we take that and apply it to the area of women's health, which is so at the time very underfunded and, not necessarily focused on.
So you were at Warby Parker, and then when did you how did the business arise? Like what was sort of the origin story there?
Yeah. So I spent about 6 years at Warby and had some awesome operating experience under my belt. As I said, when we were working on launching Prescription Check, I was able to navigate, telemedicine law and how would we build out a doctor network? Well, how do we think about the user experience? How do we think about like introducing this to customers as like something that they have never, thought about our experience before? There are so many different elements to consider that went into this. And so I was able to learn so much from that. And then of course, as I mentioned, like the area of women's health, at least then, was something that was very much overlooked. So I ended up going to business school. I went to Harvard. That's where I actually met my two co-founders, Julia and Sophia, with the idea of starting a digital health startup that was focused on providing more access to healthcare for women.
So you actually went to business school thinking, I'm going here to get these chops, tap this network, and I'm going there to prepare to launch a company. Maybe you didn't know exactly what it was going to look like yet, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, I wrote my essay about this. So I was like, knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to focus on something that, empowered women. I knew I wanted it to be in the healthcare space because I saw how much opportunity there was and how much need there was. And I had like very concrete skills from my time at Warby on how to apply that. So for me, it was a lot about like how to use my experience and time at HBS as like a testing ground. So, to test and validate ideas that I had. And also more importantly, to meet amazing co-founders, because like, I'm definitely a person that would not be able to do this alone. Like I always think about, solo founders and like I'm amazed at how strong they are, because I definitely am someone that needs that like collaboration and to like just have someone to talk to in those hard times, and like another, just like a sounding board for ideas. And so that was really, really important to me, and something that was like always in the back of my mind. So coming back to how I met Julie and Sophia. So I actually met Julie and Sophia at Startup Bootcamp, which is an amazing program that we had at HBS, which was basically like how you meet all the other founders, or people that are interested in entrepreneurship in your class. And they were also working on an idea in the women's health space, which is how I connected the dots. This was something that they were really passionate about as well. And so from there, we started chatting a ton about the space, about the needs in the space. And also obviously like getting very familiar with a lot of like the challenges that women face during this time, and just saw such a huge need in the maternal health space. I mean, as you think about all the statistics, so the US has the worst maternal health outcomes of any developed country. We have the highest cost of care. We spend about $110 billion annually on maternal health, and our outcomes are not even that good. We have 3 times the amount of C-sections that are medically necessary. The rate of preterm birth is increasing every year. And we have a ton of racial disparity in outcomes. So Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of childbirth than white women are. And unfortunately, it's very much driven by systemic racism that we have in the healthcare system. So for us, like this was an area that had so much need, and truly like there is such an opportunity to think about how do we build something that has like really the customer, the person at the center of this entire experience. And we're very lucky in terms of our timing that we were taking a class with this incredible professor, Ryan Buell, at Harvard Business School, that did a ton of research around group care models, and was sharing with us the incredible impact that he's seen of group care, specifically when it comes to treating diabetes. And a lot of the power in the model that he talked to us about was really around how patients are so much more engaged when they are part of this group care experience, because they feel more comfortable asking questions. There's not as much of that power dynamic that exists between you and the provider. You also can imagine, like almost like in a classroom, people build off of those questions that they didn't think of. And as a result, the doctor is also talking more. So they're learning a lot more about their healthcare and what is going on.
Talk a little bit about your experience as a founder going through, like you're building a business whose sole focus is on generating this and cultivating this communal care model. Yeah. But at the same time, you're a woman going through entrepreneurship, fortunately with 2 other co-founders. Talk about the solidarity that you found in one another, the support. Did you see that sort of, were you able to be more open, honest, forthcoming, vulnerable with them? And has that had a positive impact as you've developed the business, knowing that you're not in it alone too? Totally.
Well, I mean, even just being able to like come out of a meeting and be able to be like, well, how did that go? And, not necessarily feeling like you might be, like you did something wrong, or like you don't have someone to bounce ideas off of to like understand like, your perceptions of whatever happened is just so reassuring. But also just to have other people that like, I mean, frankly, Julie and Sophia and I have become almost like, but we're bonded for life through this experience, because it's honestly like, it's such a transformative experience, and there's nothing that can prepare you to being a first-time founder. Like we took, a bunch of classes, obviously at grad school, and you think you like know everything that you can potentially expect through all the different case studies that we did. But honestly, like going through it, and even with my startup experience, like going through it for the first time, there's nothing that can prepare you. And like, you absolutely need that community support to like be able to get through it. So obviously, Julie and Sophia like are huge support systems, but also just even having people outside of like your, immediate company that you can talk to about everything that you might be going through is so critical. And like one of the ways that I can stay sane is I actually have a small group of other founders that I often talk to. They're on the same stage. They're also first-time founders that are going through the same thing, that like just to like level check, like, am I, crazy for feeling this way? Or like, how did you tackle this situation? Or like, how did you think about this thing? And just having another, like set of founders that are experiencing the same thing, just so you can feel like, you're not crazy, it is so reassuring. And honestly, it's like very similar to what we do at Seven Starling, but just like, even just having that like, support system available, that you can trust, that you can like actually get real with. It's not just like a Slack group, which, we all know like all the different Slack groups that we're always invited to, and like no one ever actually talks about anything substantial. Like it's not like that. You want to be part of a community where you can like be real and be vulnerable, and share, and not necessarily like be worried that it's going to impact, anything in your life.
I would so much rather have like 2 conversations of substance than 12 conversations of nothing, like that does nothing to help me. And people are sort of like checking, bringing their ears to it.
Totally. Well, and that's the thing about, so one of the things that we really quickly realized in building our groups at Seven Starling was like people, even though they might have, family support system or friends that they can lean on during this experience, like oftentimes it's really hard for them to actually share what's going on with those people.
Why do you think that's the case?
Because like they don't want to be judged for feeling the things that they're feeling, or they feel guilty about, certain emotions that they might be going through. Oftentimes it could be, issues that they're having with their partner. That's coming up that like they haven't experienced before, and obviously they don't want their friends or family thinking differently of them in those moments. Oftentimes like they don't want like unsolicited advice, like we get that a lot going through this experience. And so I think just having a small group of people that you like develop trusted bonds with, but also like a sense of some sort of anonymity, can be really powerful.
Give us a little more color.
You just graduated from Harvard.
Yeah.
You have your 2 co-founders. Tell us what your business was like at its very infancy stage.
What was the business model?
So our first group, actually, we launched and we started testing during our second semester in our final year. And truly all it was we paired together a few women that were expecting to give birth like any day. They're all within like a few weeks of the same due date. We put them in a WhatsApp group, and we also paired them with a doula that we had, met in the Boston area, that came highly recommended, that was looking to transition out of like in-person doula work because she was getting burnt out. And we just put them in a text chat, and then we also said, okay, here's, you can like text this group anytime you have questions or need support, but also you're going to meet every 2 weeks live. And there's going to be a specific topic that we're going to cover, but it's also going to be a space for you to kind of share what's going on and have a space to open up. And so that is a little bit of how the model works. So anyway, with this initial beta group that we had, it was honestly like as simple as that. Like, let's pair together a group of women that are in the same stage. Let's pair them with a doula that we think would be a great fit for them. And let's put together some, basic curriculum to help them facilitate the discussion, but leave it at that. And actually what's amazing to see is like this group is actually still around today. And they actually ended up meeting in person once things got a bit more safe a few months ago. And they actually crossed state lines to meet each other because they had like such strong bonds from that experience. And yeah, that group has been together for 16 months and growing. And it was truly like as simple as like pairing these women together with the right expert. So that initial very simple test was so powerful in proving like how much, this model can make a difference. And then like layering on top of that, like, okay, like how can we, build out a curriculum that is truly evidence-based with, with thought leaders in the space of like exactly like all the things you might want to know or need to know during this time. And then also additional like technology to make this a bit more seamless experience, outside of WhatsApp and Zooms. So that's kind of where we have eventually gone to, but it truly started as simple as that and was incredibly powerful.
That's amazing. And so after you guys left Harvard, did you guys fundraise for your business? Is that the next step?
Just as we were starting to think about fundraising, the pandemic hit, which we never could obviously have expected. And the funny thing is that like when we were just, starting to build this model, which was always meant to be completely virtual, people were like, how are you going to get people to actually like use this? Like, don't people want to meet in person? And then, obviously, the rest. But it was such a crazy time. And so we ended up raising a small pre-seed and, really using that to continue to build out the experience and what the model could look like, the curriculum, hiring more coaches, bringing more groups, and then end up doing Pair VC Summer Accelerator program that summer, which was amazing. And also just like building a smaller community of founders that are in the same space. So what we loved about that experience was that it was 10 to 15 teams. It was really small, really intimate. And we got to spend a lot of time with a Pair team that helped us sort of continue to develop out and think about the model. And then after that experience, we kicked off our seed fundraise. And we actually haven't announced that yet. So can't share any more details there, but that was kind of like the big part of last year was finishing that off, and then really kicking into higher gear of continuing to build out the product, build out the experience, continue to expand our curriculum, build out our doula network, and also start to really build out the brand that we launched a couple weeks ago.
I want to know a little bit about the pressure you were under as an HBS grad. Obviously, that sets the bar really high, and there's a lot of expectation, and there's probably a lot of stress around raising money, getting this thing off the ground quickly. You're moving and shaking in a group of peers that are hard drivers as well. That must have been stressful. Tell us a little bit about how you manage that on a personal level, and maybe how you also leaned on your team to get you through that.
Well, yes, you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely a lot of pressure, but I think that like having such a strong community of founders that were around me was really helpful in setting things into perspective, because like outside of, that intimate community, all you hear about in like the startup world are success stories, right? Like you see like left and right, all the amazing things that founders are doing, and you rarely actually hear about all the failures and challenges that they're going through. And so like being able to have this community of founders that were in my class that I could lean on was incredibly helpful. But I also think like a lot of it comes from just like having healthy structures in place in your own life to be able to like manage all of this. So again, for me, like having the community piece is huge, but also just thinking about like what are things that keep me balanced and things that we actually teach our customers as well as part of our curriculum of like how to reframe like stresses in your life, like putting things into like the bigger picture.
Give us some of those frameworks. We'd love to hear them.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is like how to, manage uncertainty in a healthy way. And obviously like, having a baby is the whole process is uncertain and something that you can't really plan for. We even like don't like to use the word birth plan because like there's no plan. It's a preference. And like, we want to like make sure people are informed of like what their preferences are, but at the same time, like reiterate that there's like a plan isn't necessarily feasible. And we want to manage people's expectations. So for us, like managing uncertainty is a big one. And that also like is the same thing that we do every day in this startup, right? Is like, there's an incredible amount of uncertainty, and how do you think about like managing that risk and that process and providing like clarity for yourself. So one of the big techniques is just like reframing and practicing gratitude and like thinking about like what are the things in your life that are going really well, and like also practicing gratitude for like this is an amazing experience that I get to do. Like, I'm learning more than I ever have in my life. I'm like growing more personally and professionally every day. I get to like make an impact on families every single day, which is incredibly fulfilling to me. And I'm going to come out of this regardless of the outcome, being like a better person. And so that's something that I try to remind myself every day. And like, as I thought about actually, starting my entrepreneurial journey, like one of the things that was important to me was not necessarily like achieving success, like in the like traditional sense of like, I'm not a person that's driven by money. I never have been. I'm not a person that needs necessarily accolades. I'm someone that's honestly driven by like just growth and learning, and impact. And like for me, being in a space where you can make an impact every single day, even in little ways, and being able to know that I'm definitely going to come out of this having learned something, was very motivating. So like reframing that experience and not, thinking about the traditional ways of like, what does success look like, but like what truly is going to matter to me, I think has kept me a lot more balanced through all the ups and downs that like always happen. Like it's impossible to have like a rosy experience in entrepreneurship. And like, it's very much about like being resilient through like all those, hills and troughs.
Yeah,
100%.
Being resilient. And also, I really love how you keep talking about reframing, because literally you could have a crisis and your interpretation of that event as a business owner, it could be anything. So you're in a crisis mode, something horrible has just happened, and you have the opportunity to just be like, alert, horrible situation. What do I do to get through this? Or to kind of reframe it and say, is this a unique opportunity to pivot my company, go down a different line, but one that actually ultimately might lead to more success, might let me help more customers, serve people better, etc.
Exactly.
I just think that like hovering in that uncertainty, in that anxiety-stricken phase of like, this is a huge challenge, is you never really move forward from that from a point of strength. But if you can reframe that for yourself in the moment and then take your first step forward, you're off on the right foot.
Totally. And like, even thinking about, like there are certain projects or initiatives that may not work out exactly how you planned. Like for us, like the biggest thing is always having a like really comprehensive like debrief process and like, what did we learn? What are we going to apply? And like for our team and our culture, it's so important too. Like we don't want people to be afraid to make mistakes. Like we don't want people to be afraid to experiment and put things out there and learn and grow. Like that's such a big part of what we're building in our culture, is to create that like test and learn mindset. And not be afraid of making mistakes, but always, having like, what are like the 3 key takeaways that we learned and like, how do we apply them next time?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking really specifically about your recent naming.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And you literally did get all the way through the naming process, have your full creative, and had to pivot, right?
Yes.
Oh, can you tell us a little bit more about that? How did that feel?
Yeah, it was obviously in the moment very frustrating because we found this name that we thought worked really well. And, we did our own like basic trademark searches and things like that. We knew at that point, all those things, checkbox things that we had to do. And then we ended up going out to, working with our law firm, and they did a bigger search, and it came up that there was a very, very, very small, like, basically like one person was running this business that had the same name, but in like a similar enough space where it could potentially be an issue. And so for us, like obviously, first of all, wanted to respect that business, but also, obviously that was like very frustrating in the moment that we had gone such a long way and then had to pivot. But frankly, like things like that just always happen. And I think, the only way, like there was only one way to get out of it. And like the only way was to think of another name. That kind of spoke to our model, and like just continuing to just be like really hyper focused on like, okay, like what is the solution to this? Was like the only way that I could cope, frankly. And honestly, at the end of the day, like I think that the ultimate name that we have now is even more powerful. But it just like, it always takes those things to get there. I actually think we achieved an even better outcome, but those challenges are just like part of the process.
It's interesting you said when like the only thing that you could do to cope was to find a solution, really connect with that. I feel like that's sort of like what Jenny and I do when we're facing a problem, is just like hyper focus on what's the solution. Is that the dynamic of your partnership, or is that something where you have to be the leader? How does that play out?
Oh, definitely. I think that is what really bonds Julia, Sophia, and I as leaders and co-founders, is first, just like all of us are just very action-oriented people. And I think at a startup, like you need that. Like you can't really have a founder that's just like pie in the sky ideas person, because like everyone is serving a critical role in the business of like to stay running. And if one of us, weren't necessarily doing that, that would be like a huge burden on the team. So all of us like are, roll up our sleeves. It's very much part of like our dynamic as founders. We're super collaborative and like very action oriented. And so, obviously like those are things you don't necessarily like interview each other on when you're like first getting started. But I think like, we spent about 8 months working together on the idea before we decided to like, really pursue it and had a taste and flavor of like what it is to work together. But I think that's something that like really has bonded us and then made us such strong collaborators, is like the idea that like none of us are like above any task. All of us are like always rolling up our sleeves and frankly like ready to jump in and cover for each other like when we need it. It's something that like I, get so much comfort in knowing that like, you're not alone.
So I'm a mom, and I am surrounded by a neighborhood full of other mothers who are some of my greatest like mom resources. These women that live near me, we take care of our kids together. We feel like we're raising our kids together.
I mean, literally right now, Katie had childcare problems today, and another mom in the neighborhood has, let Katie bring her son by to take advantage of her baby.
Yes, 100%.
That's what it's about.
And it's one of those things where I haven't really paralleled these two, sort of entrepreneurship and business partnership and all of these things with the bond that Jenny and I have basically with some of the bonds that I share with some of the other moms in my neighborhood. But what you just mentioned about being action oriented, not being afraid to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work and stuff. This is something that I've found is really true. Like these are relationships that like are supportive and help each other in so many different ways. And I just find that really like what you're doing in this startup that you're building is in support of these women, and you're also experiencing these sort of like parallels too. It's just really interesting.
You've hit the nail on the head, I think, Katie. Like the communal care that you're doing with Starling, the business model itself actually has practical applications in your life as a co-founder, in your life as a mother, with your mom community, as for you and I as founders. It's that through thread and how effective it is as a tactic and a tool to take a step forward, to find solutions in life and business. Amazing.
It's amazing. And the fact that you, with your business, are actually facilitating these connections from before you even become a mom, from when you're pregnant. I'm not sure you realize how valuable, and I'm sure you do realize it, but it's incredibly valuable, the service that you're providing. And teaching women from a very early stage of their pregnancy, the people that you can depend on is other women. Really help you through it. It's very cool.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think it's that mix of community, but also expertise. And that's something that like is such a big part of it too, is like you have this community that you can gain perspective from, that you can lean on in those hard moments and also in those amazing moments. But you also have someone that has seen hundreds and supported hundreds of families and has seen it all and can offer you like unbiased support of like, and guidance of like, how you should approach all those different challenges and like what you can expect and like how you should navigate the process. And like one of the things that is really important to us is that you never have that moment of like, I wish someone told me that. That's like such an important part of the experience. And like a lot of people get so blindsided, especially when it comes to early postpartum and not knowing how to like manage through that process. And like, that is something that's so important to us to have like that unbiased guide. That's an expert that like you can depend on, that you get to know, that like knows your partner's name, that knows your baby's name, knows like, what you're going through at work, and can kind of help you navigate the process in a really personalized way that like, unfortunately, just our doctors don't have capacity to do, is just such a critical piece of the puzzle.
We always love to know about a real moment of pride that you've experienced thus far with your business. I know it's still in its very earliest days, but since mission and being committed to doing something with purpose and impact is so important to you, I'm sure along the way you've already had some moments that you're really proud of. So tell us about that, and then maybe close with where you see your company going in 5 years.
So for us, like honestly, like the moments of pride is just like the small wins and small ways of like that we impact families every day. So, recently we were one of the first texts that one of our customers sent when their baby was born, to their group. And it was truly within like those first minutes. But that person was so connected to their group and their doula that they like immediately wanted to share what had happened, and be like one of those first texts. So that was really special for me. And also like we had recently a customer that unfortunately experienced miscarriage. And we were also one of the first texts in that situation because unfortunately they didn't have anywhere to go to get support, to like help them manage through that experience. So for us, honestly, like the biggest thing is being seen as a resource, as a trusted resource people could go to in those like amazing highs and really low lows, and building a community where they feel like they can trust us to do that. And for us, like, the 5-year vision is really thinking about how we can grow this model in a way that we can impact more families. So right now, we're really focused on building a sustainable model that supports people through pregnancy and early parenthood, but see so much more opportunity to impact and make this model more ubiquitous in our care. Like, why is it that, we have to, see a doctor one-on-one in all sorts of different settings? Like, why can't we integrate this group-based experience in other ways of how we get healthcare? And so for us, it's thinking about, can we start, as early as preconception and helping people think about family planning, the fertility process, and also, then further into, the parenthood. There's so many ways in which we can grow this model that is so powerful and like making people really feel in control of their experiences, but also like grow community and like meaningful connection using technology, which I think is so missing today, and the tools that we have. And so that's something that like we want to build from the ground up, to make that like a core piece of what we do.
Incredible. That's amazing.
Well, we wish you all the very best luck in accomplishing that. It's an amazing mission.
Yes, and something the world really needs, for sure. Women need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on. This has been so much fun.
Tina's amazing.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, she's an incredible woman, and she and her co-founders obviously have a lot of, it's amazing to me that they have the foresight to know so much about what a woman needs throughout her pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Really incredible. Like, I think they're sort of right on the money with what they're building.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stuck out to me was that they are helping women who are pregnant manage the uncertainty and managing uncertainty in a healthy way.
Right.
And she was talking about that in the context of like in tying it back to entrepreneurship.
Right.
And that was something, especially when I was pregnant, that I never really drew those like parallels, but they're so similar. The experience of like starting a business, not knowing what to expect, not really knowing when an issue is going to arise, all the things that come up are quite similar to being pregnant
Yes.
and knowing that you're working towards this thing that's going to happen, but you don't know exactly when.
100%.
You're questioning things that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real indication of how managing uncertainty, creating frameworks, just sort of change and shift the narrative when you're faced with a problem or a disruption to a plan is like so important. When you're an entrepreneur, you sit down on day one and you're like, here's my plan. Here's my goal. We're going to be here in this moment. We're going to be there in that moment, in those 5 years. And I actually think setting certain mileposts is crucial because you know what you're working towards and you can develop some tactics and some strategies towards accomplishing them. But you need to have the flexibility and you need to know and be comfortable in uncertainty because when that roadblock comes, when you're forced to pivot, when you realize that the plan that you had on day one is being turned upside down, you need to be able to have confidence in that discomfort, in that uncertainty, and figure out a way forward.
Exactly.
And it's motherhood, it's entrepreneurship, it's, I feel like it's so applicable to many
it's across
aspects
the board of life, like having these tools, being able to be able to handle situations like this will just make you, will just serve you well.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that continues to serve women well in particular is community.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to relate and get together with and discuss and share and bond with other women. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more important, frankly.
No, there's really not.
So it seems like Tina and her co-founders really understand that and are building a business around it.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
And having that through thread throughout many aspects of life, seeing it perform over and over again and serve you well.